The 5 largest mutual funds in the U.S. combined have $1 trillion in assets. Chances are you own at least one of them, likely through your 401k or another retirement plan. But are the biggest funds really the best ones? And what changes should you consider going into the new year? Doug Flynn from Flynn Zito Capital Management is here to join us to talk about this. Doug, good to see you.
Good to see you, Ali.
Is it typical that the big funds are the ones that make the most sense for people?
Not usually. Most of the time, it's an easy one to put in. The expenses are typically lower in a larger fund, so oftentimes they find their way into 401ks. But people get familiar with the common names that are in them, and that's it doesn't mean it's necessarily the best, but it's probably not. They're not the worst either.
Let's take a look at some of them. Vanguard 500 Index and Institutional Index. We'll give you, by the way, on the screen the tickers for these things, and that's their performance. 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year looks really good. 1 year, 26%, beats the market a little bit. The S&P's up around just a little less than that.
That actually is the index. That's the index 500. So that's about matching the market. And generally that's a common fund to have in there. If you have over 10,000, you can get a better share class through Vanguard and the other fund families, so the expenses will be a little lower. Indexing, what happens with that is that the top 2 holdings, which are Apple and Exxon, are 6% of the entire portfolio.
Right.
The top 6 positions are 1/8 of the entire portfolio. So that means the 500th position in there, which is AutoZone, is 0.01%.
So no consequence.
Yeah.
So it feels more diversified than you're actually getting. But that is, if you look at the stock market and you see the performance of the S&P 500 hitting record after record after record,
yes.
That's it.
That is it. So what we like better than that oftentimes is different types of indexing, like an equal weight. So perhaps instead of having those large positions and smaller ones, an equal weight index 500 would have 0.2 across the board of all 500 positions, and it typically, if you look at the performance, is actually a little bit better. So those are things to take a look at.
PIMCO, Total Return Fund. We often have the guys from PIMCO here. Muhammad Al-Arian, great commentator. This is a fixed income, which is why people look at this and say, wait, I lost money in the last year, but that's fixed income. That's the same as going to buying bonds and very low risk stuff.
Interest rates went up, so a bond fund is going to suffer typically with interest rates going up. Now you have Bill Gross here, who's managed the fund for over 26 years. Typically when he's had a year of underperformance, every single time that I can see, he's followed it with a period of outperformance. He seemingly still can do it. The yield on it is a little bit higher than the average bond fund index. So you're paying for Bill Gross, you're paying for his knowledge, and he seemingly is doing it. But it's a very large fund, and there's 12,000 different positions in there, and lots of synthetic types of bonds. So you just have to know it's a little bit higher risk than the average bond fund. You have to know what you're getting.
All right, let's talk about the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index. How is this different from the 500 index?
So it takes the 500, but it also takes the mid-sized companies and the small-sized companies. Okay. It's about 3,000 to 3,500
And you can
stocks.
see that the 1 year gain's a little higher. Is that because of the mix?
That's right. What you'll find is that the mid-cap and the small-cap funds, and those stocks are a little more aggressive. They'll perform a little bit better in good times and maybe a little worse in others. Sure. So if you like that, or you have less assets, you want to put it in one fund, it is much more broadly diversified than the just straightforward Index 500. I like it better.
Of the top 5, the best performer over the last year has been American Funds Growth Fund of America. It's got $123 billion under management. It's up 31% for the year. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is now you take the S&P 500 and you break out just the growth stocks, and that's essentially what this is. It's not just those, but you're paying for the managers, an actively managed fund. It's the largest
and real quickly,
fund.
Growth are stocks that you think will grow faster than their peers versus value, where you think a stock's worth more than it's costing.
Take the market, a little less dividend-oriented, a little bit more growth and share price appreciation-oriented. The manager's seeking out that kind of growth potential. If they do a good job, it translates in there. The fund is okay. It's an acceptable growth fund. There are better ones in that space. You have to realize it's more aggressive than just the typical large cap fund because it's focusing solely on growth stocks.
But in a lot of cases, people won't have those other options if it's in their 401k.
That's right. This might be your only growth fund.
These are some of the reasons why these are big funds.
Choice in that for sure.
Last one is the American Funds Euro-Pacific Growth Fund, up a little less than the S&P 500, but that's not the right comparison because this isn't about American stocks.
No, in fact, it's everything but American stocks. It's an international fund, and you should have internationals in your portfolio, so they're not just U.S. centric. Now, this fund, because it's actively managed, it's very very large. If you look at it, it's funny because it has a 3-star rating for Morningstar,
Right.
but that's because it has a 4-star rating for 10 years, a 3-star rating for 5 years, and a 2-star rating for 3 years.
So it averages out.
But if you focus on that, what it's saying is it's gotten progressively worse as time has gone on. So it's one to take a look at because you're paying. International funds do have higher expenses, but it has low expenses in that space. But there are other options that you should seriously take a look at in this space because of how it's sort of gotten progressively lower in its return.
And Doug helped me on my book explain these things to you, so if you want to hear more about him, you can pick that up. Doug Flynn of Flynn Zito Capital Management. Always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for being here, Doug.
Thanks, Ali.
All right, just in time for the holidays, they've come up with a new way to make charitable donations to your favorite causes that won't cost you a dime. It's called Giving Without Giving. We'll give you that story when we return.